In this video, I'm going to show you how to create something called a method in your code, and we'll be using something called passing by value. I'm also going to show you how to implement a clear button to clear everything in your form, your text boxes and your label. And lastly, I want to go over the order of operations when performing math. This is something that you actually may know already from any kind of algebra math class you've taken in the past. So if you're familiar with order of operations from regular math, then it's the exact same thing with C#. So let's initialize our two buttons, our calculate button and our clear button. We'll do the clear button second, but first I want to focus on calculating. So what we could do is we could take the values in our text boxes and store them into numeric variables, which you should know how to do already. I'm putting these on separate lines, but if you want to, you could actually put them on the same line. Like, for example, you could do this if you wanted. There's nothing wrong with that. It goes off the edge of the screen, so it's kind of hard to see it. So I decided to use separate lines just to make it easier for all of you to read this. And let's say you want to do a quick addition equation, so you do results equals num1 plus num2, and then you output to label results. You test the program, and of course I forgot to do the toString. Try it now. And I got the correct answer. But what you can do instead is, instead of putting everything inside the calculate method, you can create a separate method that's dedicated specifically to performing the calculation. So what you can do, and this is a really basic example. There are other examples where you would more aptly use methods to do this type of thing. But a method is basically a bit of encapsulated code that's designed to do one specific task, and it's a way of making your code in your program more modularized, make it easier to find, make it easier to understand how your code works. So let's say we have our new method. Let's call it private. We'll talk about private declarations in a later video when we talk about classes and inheritance. Just for right now, understand that we're going to call it private. And we're going to do a return type, which I'll talk about later on also. It's going to be decimal, and we're going to call the method calculate numbers. And if you're paying attention, then this method we created looks kind of similar to an event method. It has a private declaration, it has a return type, void and decimal, and it has a name, and it also has two parentheses that may or may not have something inside it. We'll talk about the contents of the parentheses very, very soon. So what we have here is our method, and don't worry about this error message, we'll fix that later on. We're just missing a return statement. So what we have here, let's say that in our example, we're just going to cut and paste all that code in here. In fact, actually in this situation, this first example, we don't even need to have decimal, we can just put void. So what happens is, in our button calculate method, in order to execute all this code in here, all we have to do is call the calculate numbers method. And you can do that by just copy and paste. And there we go. Oh, and of course, a semicolon. Let's try a program out and see what happens, if it works or not. It'll work, but... So let's do 10 and 20. That should be 30. And we got 30. Ta-da! So what happened? We activated our button calculate method by clicking on the button. That button calculate method activated the calculate numbers method. And that calculate numbers method did all of this. So that's one way you can use methods. It's a very, very simple example. However, let's make this a little bit more complicated. What we'll do instead is we're going to collect the information from the two text boxes. We're going to collect the information inside the button calculate click event method. And what we're going to do is we're going to send the values num1 and num2, we're going to send them into the calculate numbers method. So what we do here is we have our, this is called a method call, and this right here, this is called method definition. So we have our method call, and that method call is going to send num1 and num2. They're going to basically take a copy of num1 and num2. They're going to copy the values, the number values, and send those values inside the calculate numbers method. So here's how we do that. So first we want to describe, or we want to define what we're allowed, or what is possible, or what we are able to send into this method. So we're going to say we are allowed to send two decimals. So when we're inside the method, the two decimals we send will be called x and y. We can call these whatever we want. We could call them num2, num1. We can call them a and b. We could call them x, y, z and z, y, x. Whatever we want to call them. But I'm just going to call them x and y to make it really simple. So what happens is we're going to have num1 and num2 match up to the x and y. So this calculate numbers method, it will accept, like I said, two variables that get sent to it. These are called parameters or arguments. You can use both terms if you want, but I'll be using them interchangeably, parameters and arguments. It accepts two of them, two decimals. So what we're going to do is we're going to, down here, say num1 and num2. What this does is num1 gets sent into the method, and num1 gets assigned to the value of x, whereas num2 gets sent to the method and gets assigned to the value y. Pay close attention that num1 does not get assigned to the value of y, and num2 does not get assigned to the value of x. They're assigned in sequence. So the first variable up here is assigned the value of the first variable down here, and the second variable up here is assigned the value of the second variable down here. And if we want to do something else, maybe we want to also pass in a string, then what we could do is something like here. That would be perfectly fine. And this string right here would be assigned to the value z. So you can pass in any data type you want, just as long as you follow this general format. First, second, third, first, second, third. Okay, so let's go over here, and we have a number, or we have a decimal the result decimal, let's just say, let's just keep this the same. I'm not going to change the name. You could name this whatever you want, but I'm just going to keep it as result. And notice how num1 and num2 have errors. That's because num1 and num2, they were declared inside the button calculate method, and they can be used inside the button calculate method. But once they get passed into calculate numbers, they are basically replaced. So instead of num1 and num2, they're now going to be referred to as x and y. So we need to replace these with x and y. And again, let me reiterate, you don't need to rename these. You don't need to call them x and y. If you want to, you could do num1 and num2. There would be nothing wrong with that. This actually works now. But the reason why I'm using different naming conventions, x, y versus num1, num2, is just to show you that the original num1 and num2 that were declared in the calculate button event method would be different than the numbers declared inside calculate number. Because all we're doing is we're copying the values in num1 and num2, and we're putting those copies into x and y. And we're also copying the value of whatever that string is and pasting that value into the z thing. Okay, so the next step, of course, is to calculate result. So it's going to be result equals x plus y, simple. And we could go ahead and just keep it as is. We could say, oh yeah, we're going to output the result to the result label. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. But I want to show you one more feature of methods which requires me to, well, in order to demonstrate the feature, then I'm going to need to put this line of code back down here into our method, our button calculate event method. So what we're going to do here is this void modifier right here. What that means is there is no return type. And you don't know what a return type is yet. I'll talk about that very shortly. But that basically, that's what the void means, is that there is no return type. You're not allowed to have any kind of return statement. So what we'll do now is we're going to change that return type from void to decimal. And then we're going to create a return statement. And we're going to return the value that's stored in result. So what have I done here? So we start by calling the method. We pass num1 and num2 and this weird random. I'm going to delete this actually because we really don't need that. So we pass num1 and num2 into x and y. We declare a local variable inside the calculate numbers method. This variable, by the way, this is only valid inside this method. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add x and y and assign that value to result. We could even do this if we want to make it even simpler. That's perfectly fine. And then we're going to return whatever has been added or calculated in our equation. And the return statement, whatever is being sent back by the return statement, what that means is that whatever is being returned by the return statement is going to become equal, or basically this original call or this method call is going to be equal to whatever is returned in this return statement right here. So let's say we have x is 5 and y is 7. That's what, 12 I think? Yeah, 12. So result is going to be equal to 12 in that situation. We're going to return the number 12. And therefore, this entire bit of code that I'm highlighting right now, that is going to be equal to the number 12. Or rather, it's going to be equal to whatever is returned in this return statement. So what we can do now is we can declare another variable. I'm going to go ahead and change this variable name really quickly to make this a bit easier to get. I'm going to go ahead and declare a variable here called result. And so whatever is being returned from the return statement is assigned to this method, or basically this entire highlighted content is equal to the return value. And whatever that value is going to get assigned to the result variable down here. And now we can go ahead and print out the result variable into our label. So let's run the program and see if it works, or if I'm completely full of it and lying to you. Which I'm not, but it's just good to show you the end result. Alright, so we have 5 and 7, 12. There we go. So that's a very basic example of using passing by value. You pass one or more arguments into a method. You do something in the method to perform math or something. It doesn't have to be math. And then whatever output you get, you return it as a return statement. And the data type of what's being returned must match the data type that's given right here. In this case, it has to be decimal. And then whatever value gets returned gets to replace the original value of the method call, and that gets assigned to anything that it is equal to in the code. So in this case, it is equal to the number, or the variable result, so it's assigned to result, like so. And then the rest is what you should already know how to do, is you just output the result variable into the label for output, and that's it. So, fun stuff. Now, I told you we're going to go over 2 more topics in this video, order of operations and the clear button. Let's talk about order of operations first really quickly. Let's go ahead and do something like that. Let's do a quick math equation here. So we have x plus y times 5. So let's say, for example, we passed in 4 for an x and 2 for y. What do you think the output would be? Think about that for just a second. You can pause the video if you'd like to. But x is 4 and y is 2. What do you think that result's going to look like? I'm going to run the program right now and show you. So 4, 2, and we get the result of 14. So was that the result you were expecting? Or were you expecting something different? Let me show you how this works. So the order of operations, it's basically, it says that certain math operations are going to be performed first, going from left to right. And then other math operations will then be performed going from left to right. So it's not a linear left to right for the entire equation, but certain math operations will take priority. So what kind of priority is this? Well, usually if you're putting something to an exponent or to a power, that's usually going to come first. And then after that is going to be from left to right. It's going to be multiplication, division, or modulus. So, like, for example, if we have division and then multiplication and then modulus, it'll go in that sequence, division, multiplication, and modulus. And after that, after all multiplication, division, and modulus has been completed, then we'll do any addition or subtraction. So how did our math work here? If x is 4 and y is 2, then we started by doing the multiplication first, and after the multiplication, we did the addition. So 2 times 5 is 10. And then 10 plus 4 is 14, which is what we got right here. Because of order of operations, multiplication and division and modulus will always be performed before addition. So what happens, what should we do if we want addition to be performed first? So instead of doing 2 times 5 is 10 plus 4 is 14, what if you want to first do 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Well, we have to put the addition inside parentheses to indicate that this needs to be done first. Now our equation will give us the result of 30. So let's take a look at that. There we go, 30. Because the parentheses forced the addition to happen before the multiplication. So just be aware of that the order of operations does exist in C#. In fact, it exists in most programming languages. And if you want to enforce a specific sequence, you need to use parentheses very carefully. And by the way, the exact same thing exists with a TI calculator. So, yeah, if you know how to use a TI, then this isn't much different. And then the last topic I want to talk about is how to create a clear button that will clear all of the text fields and label fields in your form. In a later video, we'll actually show you how to do that same thing with checkboxes and radio buttons, but for right now, I just want to show you how to do this with text boxes and labels. So this is actually really simple. Remember, the value in a text box or a value in a label is nothing more than the text property of that object. And all you gotta do is set that text property to a blank string. So let me show you really quickly. We'll do text num1.text and set that equal to an empty string. And then we'll do the same thing with text num2. And of course, LBL result.text equals that. And that should work. So let's go ahead and test it really quickly to show you that works. So we got 5 and 2, calculate, and then clear. And it's all been cleared. So, yeah, really simple. And, well, that is basically all I want to show you in this video right here. So hopefully this has been useful. I'm going to do a later video that will build on this existing example. And in that video, I'm going to show you how to create something called a global counter. And I'm also going to incorporate that in with the clear button, which you'll see what I mean when I do the video. If you watch the video, hopefully you will. So hopefully this video here has been useful for you, and I will see you in the next one.